I live in Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is a place where a person who doesn't earn a comfortable livelihood is called a poor person. In the United States of America, the culture that surrounds us tells us that a person who doesn't earn a comfortable livelihood is not a person. What are you worth? To me, to talk to such a group of people who are willing to give their lives in a country where earning money is of paramount importance, it's much more than a privilege and an honor. It's a very big achrayus. Especially the subject that I was called upon to speak about my Rebbe Zechroni Livrocha. He used to say, when he was introduced as the son of Rebbe Chanan, he used to say, sometimes a son has a father, but a father doesn't have a son. I have a Rebbe. I don't know if I can call myself a Talmud. I'm going to try and take, in a very systematic way, as much as I can, to touch on the major points of chinuch that he stood for. And to try and understand what he would tell you. We're going to be using stories as well as his own words, because all we'll be doing is saying stories in his own words. I hope not to take up any space here, because a story sometimes is the most effective way of fixing a point in a person's mind. I want to begin with the first thing that he taught me as a 13-year-old child. As a 13-year-old boy. And the last thing that he taught me as a 45-year-old child. For 32 years. Things that came in between those 2 points in time fit these two ends. I remember when my first day or second day in Los Angeles, and we were studying Torah in English. And I had this course of learning for 8 years in Torah Emes in Borough Park in Yiddish. And I went up to him and I said, I can't understand how I did it. I said to him, I feel like I'm in a conservative school. English? The audacity. He did an amazing thing. He answered me. He said to me, Torah is given in 70 languages. We learn Torah in the language that we're best able to understand. He told me many years later, you do not study Torah in order to learn a language. The Torah is not a handmaiden to anything else. That was his lashon. That was the first thing he taught me. The last thing he taught me was, chinuch, he called a child a pikadon. You want to be successful in raising a child, you have to remember that the child is not yours. He used to say that the generation gap is caused by my son the doctor. You want to have nachas from your child? A child is not a nachas machine. And he told me, he gave me a mashal. If a child is coming Erev Shabbos into the kitchen, and the child is disturbing, and you must shoo that child out of the kitchen, because it's disturbing your Shabbos preparations. He said, if you shoo the child out of the kitchen because the child is bothering you, is disturbing you, that his lashon was, it's anti-educational. The results, he said, would be imperfect. If, however, you shoo that child out of the kitchen Because that child has to learn not to disturb that chinuch. In your mind's eye is only what the child needs. These 2 points in my life mirror the ideology that he stood for in chinuch. He lived at a time after the Churban, and the suffering that he personally endured from that Churban. The Rebbetzin Alei Shalom was never the same. And what did it do to him? He said, we have to build. And he used to say that Noach built a geffen. He built a vine after the Churban. The first thing he did after the Mabul, he planted a vineyard. And a lot of problems came from it. Why did he plant a vine? So Rebbe says like this: after such a Churban, he stepped out onto the world. It was empty, it was desolate. Noach had lost a lot of relatives. He needed a drink. He needed a drink. Yayin, Yisama, Levav Enosh. He needed a drink. So Rebbe said he was right. But at the time of a Churban, who thinks of himself? You don't think of yourself after a Churban. You get to work. You don't think about taking a drink. He never thought about taking a drink. He used to say that this door reflects the Chazal K'choylo Shel Sfas Hayom. And he says, just like you dig holes in the ocean, in the seashore, the tide comes in and fills up those holes. That's Klal Yisrael. There's a Churban. The Goyim dig holes in Klal Yisrael. They cause us devastating losses. But l'kachol shel sfas hayom, and those holes get filled in. I remember 10 years ago spending 2 hours on the beach in Netanya, teaching myself that lesson. I got a terrible sunburn, but I learned it. So his approach was, at a time of Churban, when the world is desolate, we have to work, we have to do. And his guidelines for how to go, he used to quote a mission in Pirkei Avos. When it comes to taking those who are far away back to Torah, he said there Anshe Knesset HaGedolah taught us 3 things. Havei Mesunim Badin. Don't be quick to judge. Learn where people are coming from. Why are they that way? Teach Torah Hamidu Talmidim Harbe. But you're going to be in a place where it's not such a wonderful environment for you. You have to asusi aglu Torah to protect yourself, that you will not become influenced. Asusi aglu Torah. And he was very clear about how Torah was to be taught. He used to say that you can drive a car 2 ways. There's automatic shift, where you give the mechanism a directive, and the mechanism turns the wheel. And you also have a manual, where you are actually turning the wheel. It says in an automobile you could do that. This is mashal. I am trying to say nothing of my own, and as much as possible to recall his word. But what about a derrick? His mashal. What about a derrick that has to lift big tons of cement, slabs of concrete? You can't do it on manual. You have to have automatic. He used to say, Torah is automatic drive. When you teach Torah, it's automatic drive. It will have hashpah. But there's a condition. It has to be Torah's chayim. It has to be Torah of life. That means it has to be relevant to the person who is being taught. Do not teach Hilchos Shabbos to a group who are not Shomer Shabbos. Torah must be learned with the understanding that I will want to keep it. That type of Torah is automatic drive. It will be mashpia. He made people from with Perek HaMafkid. He made people Shomer Shabbos with Perek HaMafkid. There doesn't anything in Perek HaMafkid about Shabbos. It says Torah has that koyach of changing a person. And he quoted the Rambam, the famous Rambam in Hilchos Mamren Gimel, to be mekarev the tinoik shenishbo ben ha'umayis with divrei shalom. Divrei shalom, he said, Sefer Bereshis, Pirkei Avos, these are things which they can relate to, and they change them. Another condition, that the Torah has to be real Torah. It could be in small doses, but it has to be real. And he gave a mashal with a potato. He says there are two kinds of potatoes. A farmer goes to market, and there's a synthetic potato, which is a genetic miracle. It's perfectly round, it has a thin skin, it cooks quick, and it's clean. And the skin is smooth. And then there's the regular potato, which is dirty, it's rough, has a thick skin. Which potato is the farmer going to buy? He's going to buy the real potato. You know why? Because synthetic potatoes don't make more potatoes. Torah, in order to produce Jews, must be real. It could be a small dose, but it has to be real. It can't be synthetic. One of the Tanoim, in fact, this was his life credo, and I will soon quote from him, Be'ez Hashem, was that the Rebbe is there for the Talmud, not vice versa. He remembers hearing a conversation between his father, Rebbe Chonon, and Rabbi Aaron Kotler, Zichronim Livrocha. They were talking about the Chafetz Chaim. And Rebbe Chonon was telling over a story that happened with him. When the Chafetz Chaim grew old, he became weak, and he used to communicate to the Klal Yisrael by means of a kol koreh, proclamation. They couldn't travel around. Rebbe Chonon took dictation, and he was sitting at the end of a long table, and the Chafetz Chaim was talking, and Rebbe Chonon was writing. At one point, Rebbe Chonon decided he would change a word or two to make it clearer. And the Chafetz Chaim stopped and said, Chonon schreib was zog. Write what I see. It was impossible for the Chafetz Chaim to see what he was writing. And I don't remember who said what, but they said to each other, Rabbi and Rebbe Chonon, the reason the Chafetz Chaim was able to do that is because the truth is, this is all in front of us. The world is a beautiful world, and we should be able to see much more than we see. But we live for ourselves. And there's a mechitza. There's a barrier. The Chafetz Chaim didn't live for himself. The barrier, the glass was much thinner. A Rebbe is not supposed to take up space. And I want to give you examples of what he did that would demonstrate that. When he came to France before World War II, he spent a month learning French because he wanted to talk to the Talmidim in their language, because that's what the Talmud thinks. To use the term that my roommate, Rav David Latz, Shlita, uses, Rebbe didn't feel he was the balabas. He was a soldier. He didn't take up any space. He wasn't there for himself. Rebbe said the following verse. He says, he counts the stars by number. He gives them all names. He says, well, do they have names or do they have numbers? And he said, in an army, you have two types of soldiers. You have the foot soldier who has a number. You don't know his name. And you have the chief of staff. You know his name, you don't know his number. Why? Because the contribution of a foot soldier is in his numbers. One foot soldier does not make an army. His contribution is his numbers. We know him by his number. The chief of staff, Hashem Yerachem, there should be two chiefs of staff. the chief of staff, his contribution to the army is his military genius, his ability to plan strategy. Him! We know him by his name, not his number. Every Jew, he said, sometimes is a foot soldier, sometimes has to be willing to be a number, one of many, and sometimes he has to know that he's chief of staff. His mashal, that Klal Yisrael was like an army. He was once at a Sheva Brachas in one of the outlying communities of Los Angeles. It was being hosted by a Chabad family. This goes back 35 years. And Bnei Darkei Shalom, the local Reform rabbi, was also invited. And this rabbi said to Rebbe, I didn't know you were Lubavitcher. They said, no, I'm not. But Klal Yisrael is the army of Hashem. The first time, Rebbe says that the first time that the Jewish people are called by a non-familial title, Bnei Yaakov, Bnei Yisrael, the first time they are not known by a family title is V'hoya be'etzem hayoimahu yotzu kol tzivos Hashem eretz Mitzrayim. We're called tzivos Hashem, we're called armies. Every army has a wing. You serve in your wing. So his rabbi said to him, you mean, that means I'm also part of the army. He says, yeah, sure you are. He says, which part of the army am I? He says, you. You're from the deserters. They tried to focus on every single Talmud, what that Talmud needed. Several weeks ago, when I realized the enormity of the achrayus that I was taking upon myself to talk about Rebbe to such a group, I reached for a telephone and I called up Rav Reuven Levinson from Chicago. Rav Reuven, I had not spoken to him for 33 years. But Rav Reuven is a person that it was a pashut I'll call up Rav Reuven. So what if I haven't spoken to him for 33 years? And I said to him, take 2 weeks and think. And he told me a ma'aseh. 2 weeks later. Told me several ma'ases, which we will quote in his name, Bezos Hashem. He says there was a Talmud who came from San Francisco. He was an older person. He wasn't a young teenager. He needed something to challenge his mind. The person didn't know from anything. Had no Jewish background. He remembers that he used to sleep in the room next to the office. And Rebbe Zechroni Levrocha had a Hebrew typewriter, which was a rarity then. And he used to hear Rebbe typing until 2 and 3 in the morning a linear translation of Shnai Mochsin. Every word translated into English, because that's what the Talmud needed. Focus on what the Talmud needs. He used to speak Wednesday nights in Or Sameach, and they brought in a Talmud, someone from the outside with long hair, and there was no place to sit except next to Rebbe, and this person didn't understand what he was talking about. Someone noticed that under the table, Rebbe was holding his hand, just stroking his hand to make him feel wanted. He used to have guests Friday night from an amazing Shabbos table. And one Friday night they were going around the table talking about what each one did. It turned out that one of the guests was a longshoreman. He works at the docks. Not such a Jewish profession. And there was an embarrassed silence. And Rebbe said, you know, we have something in common. He said, we're both Wasserman. We're both Wasserman. We're both people of the water. To make that person feel comfortable, he knew what to say. The first thing was what the Talmud needed. And to be able to focus on that, you had to be able not to take up space. You had to be there not for yourself. Rebbe never gave up on a Talmud. Again, to quote Rav Reuven Levinson, there was a Talmud who came to the yeshiva a very unusual way. He had heard about, had wanted to know a little bit more about Judaism. He came from a family which was totally removed. But they had an accountant or a lawyer who was a shomer Torah, and they asked him, do you know of any way our son could learn about Judaism? So he sent him to Rebbe, who was running a summer camp. Towards the end of that summer camp, they made a birthday party for him, and the mother, the Zechron Livrocha, who was nifter just several days ago, came and said to her son, what is it you want? What is it that I can give you for a birthday present? You know what he did? He took out of his pocket a registration form to the yeshiva. He says, this is what I want. And she sent him. When he graduated high school, Rebbe was afraid that he was going to get lost. So he sent Talmidim up to the place where this person lived to visit him, to be kind to him, to be close to him, because that's what that person needed. I remember myself, when I was 13 or 14 years old, it was Pesach vacation. Everyone went home except for me, because I lived in New York, and someone else, my roommate, the Zechron Livrocha, Gedalia, who had no place to go. So we were both there. And we were horsing around. He was learning with us, and we were horsing around. It was Ben Azman, we weren't so much into the Rebbe's store, we weren't so interested. He got up to leave. And we were stunned. How could we do this? How could we have done this? And we both came running after him to say, Rebbe, please come back. Please come back and learn with us. You know what he said to us? No. That no was still ringing in my ears. Several years ago, I asked him for Mechila. But that no is ringing in my ears because we needed to hear the no. If he would have said yes, if he would have come back, I would have forgotten it long ago. He knew what that Talmud needed, and that's what he gave him. He also felt very strongly that a person has to know, like Rav Matasio just said, a Ben Torah stands for something. A Ben Torah respects themselves and respects what they stand for. And he remembered when he was traveling in Europe right after World War II, he was wearing a U.S. Army uniform in order to gain easy access into the refugee camps, to the DP camps. And he fell asleep on the train, and his uniform became creased. He came to the gate, and he was stopped by an American captain. And he said to him, where are you going? And he said, I'm on a mission to reach out to the Jewish survivors. And the captain said to him, not in that uniform. You represent the American government. You cannot appear in a creased uniform. We stood for something. We stand for something. Rebbe was very makpid about that. Because Rav Matasio said that we are Talmidei Chachamim in the eyes of our Talmidim, for sure. But the truth is, we are Talmidei Chachamim in the eyes of the world. Whether we wish to be called Talmidei Chachamim or not is a different point. Whether we are Talmidei Chachamim or not is a different point. But we are looked at as Talmidei Chachamim. So he was very makpid that our uniforms don't get creased. Someone once had the audacity to ask him how it is he was able to be such a great mechanech if he didn't have children of his own, biological children. And he said over a ma'aseh, which I heard from Rebbe many times. In his house, Rebbe said like this, he learned chinuch from his father. He remembered how his father ran a house. In his house, there was a rule. I'm not telling you to implement this rule, that if you asked for something, you didn't get it. And one day, the Rebbetzin came in with a jar of honey. Honey was an unbelievable delicacy in Europe. And Reb David, Olav Shalom, his younger brother, wanted some honey. He knew if he asked for it, he wouldn't get it. So what did he do? He stood up on a stool next to the honey and made a loud shahaklel. Rebbetzin Wasserman, Rebbe's mother, Olav Shalom, Nichla, Olav Shalom, went quickly to fetch him a glass of water. But what was behind that? And why am I not telling you to implement that? Because that house was built on such trust that if there is something that I can give to you, I will give it to you. You don't have to ask. If your home is built on such trust, then you can start thinking about it. I would not take that achrayus in my house. But he learned chinuch from his father. But again, he answered the question. I remember I went with him to a place in Eretz Yisrael where they were training Rebbes. It was amazing. I sat in the morning in this place, and I thought, I hadn't realized that it was a teacher training program. I thought it was a place for disinterested teenagers. I couldn't believe it when I found out that these people are going to become teachers in 3 years. And when Rebbe taught them, they were all ears. They were all ears. The first thing that Rebbe instituted in that mechon, in that institute, was what they had done was that each of the 3 years they were taught a perek, which they would then teach for the rest of their lives in cheder. I think it was Hakoines and Hamafkid and Elu Mitzias. He changed that immediately to Masechta Sukkah. Because the Rebbe has to know how to learn. When you have to teach Perek HaKoines, you will learn Perek HaKoines. How to learn. Rebbe Zechron Livrocho was very makpid on understanding the function of every word. He used to use that word all the time, function. He used to quote the Rambam, that wisdom can be measured by how many things I understand the function of. If you don't understand the function of every word, then you don't understand it. I remember one day he was Molei Simcha. This was about 10 years ago. He told me he had made a discovery. You know, he went to teach in Wasserman, and they gave him the top shear. And he said, no, they don't need me here. And he kept working himself down till the bottom. Oh, here they need me. People who didn't know anything. And he was teaching them Perek Shnai Ma'echzin. And it said there, Moide B'Knas Potter. How do you know that someone admits to being Chayiv Knas? So Rashi says in Baba Kama, we learn it out Mikroi from Psukim. He says, what do you mean? It's not Psukim. It's one pasuk. Asher Asher and Elohim. His eyes were lit up. He says he never saw that before. Because he was learning with beginners, he had to translate every word. And he saw Mikroi, Psukim. And the simcha, I don't remember his teretz, but the joy in his eyes of having discovered the function of a word. And he had a pshat. Why did Rashi say Mikroi Psukim when it was only one pasuk? All I could remember was that it was ingenious. It was beautiful. But what I remember is the emotion, the joy of having rediscovered the function of something. Rebbe was Rebbe's credo. I think was best expressed in his tzavor. I want to read to you some of the words that he wrote. He forbade hespedim unless his wife was still alive. Then one person could be mastered. And he permitted them to say only one thing about him. I ask that they do not be mastered me. They ask Reb Shlomo Zalman the day of the Levaya if his wishes could be contravened, and he said no. And not to mention about me any praise, chutz mizeh, except for the following. And in a nutshell, is his message to Mechanchim. Sheroy pa'amim, she'yisi melamid letalmidim. Most of the time when I was teaching Talmidim, hishtadalti, I tried, she'yavinu divrei Torah lefi koicham, that they should understand Torah according to their koyach, according to their ability. By the yard site, I was asked to speak in the Beis Olam. I had the honor of saying the Kaddish through the year, officially, and my father concurred and said to me, "Here is your father." And the night before, I asked one of the Chashuvei Yerushalayim, "Why is there still so much pain?" A mess is forgotten after 12 months. After that, you're crying for someone else. After 12 months, that's it. Why? The pain is not a pain of what was. The pain is a pain of what is. Rebbe used to say, Mazdiki harab mikikoichovim, those who turn the many to righteousness are like stars. And the Gemara says these are the teachers of the young. And he explained it as follows. A star gives out light, and its distance is measured in light years. That means hundreds and hundreds of years later, if the star is hundreds of light years away, that star may have gone out already. It's not there anymore, but you still see the light. You still see the light. Of course, the light doesn't reach my eyes until hundreds of years later. A Rebbe is like a star. A Rebbe is someone who gives to Talmidim, and they shine. If we can take this lesson, that it is the Talmud who matters, and that's all that matters, then that light that he spoke about himself, that he chose to mention as the focus of his life. Hishtadalti shiavinu divrei Torah lefi koicham. He told me that, and we're going to have to end. Once in his life, he met Rabbi Yerucham, Zechroni Levracha. Rabbi Yerucham was a world mechanech. And Rabbi Yerucham told him something. He said, "You're a young man now, you may not understand fully what I'm telling you." The Gemara says in Psochim, more than the calf wants to nurse, the mother wants to give the milk. So if the mother wants to give the milk, so why, that's what the Gemara says. So why doesn't the cow unload its milk in a gush, in a torrent? Rabbi Yerucham asked him. He says that would be hashchosa. Rabbi was makpid on using that word. Rabbi Yerucham said it's hashchosa. For a Rebbe to give Talmidim too much milk at once. The calf wants to nurse, and the mother wants to give that milk so much. So why doesn't it flood the calf with milk? because it wants to give the milk for the calf's benefit. And that means drop by drop. Hishtadalti, I tried. Shiavinu divrei Torah lefi koicham. If we will do that, if we will remember and take a good hard look at our Talmidim, b'mesunim badin, and understand that we give them the Torah that they need, then the Torah will be automatic drive. And we will be zoicher, like him, to be kekechovim. Ashreichem.